Hello, everyone. Sorry for my late. Time changes, that's not working for me. Seems like that. Okay. I think Wojtek said he will not be able to attend the first part of the meeting, so we can start directly. So far, we don't have anything in the agenda. So no one added anything in the agenda. So please, let's discuss actually the first thing that worry me a little bit is API PR. So Matt, if you have any update about that.
For the API review, sorry.
Yeah.
So actually, Amtech may have more updates. I was out of office last week. I don't think we have good news. We made some progress, but I think nothing merged, right? Amtech.
Yeah, we only got like some feedback from team on Wednesday. We aligned on like so to say more controversial or like less obvious parts, and addressed all of the team's comments so far, and basically waiting like the ball's in his court right now, basically.
Okay, while we have code freeze in a couple of days, what is the backup plan for that? Are we going to, like ask for extension from now for everything related to Workload API, which is a lot of PRs, or what do you think?
So luckily, team works at our company, so we were able to start an internal escalation to basically prioritize that ASAP. So yeah, but nothing more than we can do right now at the moment.
Like we are still operating under the assumption that we will manage to merge everything. Dominic can like tell you more, but the PRs are reviewed by Dominic, and overall they look okay. So we hope even you will have some like API changes, there will be like mechanical to update the PRs. And like we believe Tim will find time. He's just super busy as Tim.
Yeah, I can imagine.
We consider like going to other API reviewer, but we like agreed that it would probably be worse if we try someone else like Jordan Liggy, because they are also busy with API reviews, as everyone is, and we very few.
Yeah, and don't have sufficient context regarding
exactly. So that's something we already discussed like internally, and probably for the next cycle we want to consider like going like not only relying on team, maybe building context with some other API reviews ahead of time, and also like reserving some time in the queue. But for 136 we should stick with team because he already has like context, he already like started those reviews, and yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I think Dominic, do you have anything? I think you were about to add some context.
Yeah, I'm afraid that we don't have a plan B. We still, like Matt said, we assume that we will merge those. Of course, we can like get back to the original version, but that would mean that we might be able only submit the P0. I'm not sure if we would be able to submit completely workload topology or scheduling changes. That would be challenging.
Okay. Okay, let's see what will happen today. I think we have a sig-scheduling meeting tomorrow, so we can double check again and see how it goes. All right. Any other topic for discussion? Any block for the PRs, except the API review?
Yeah, I was just getting slides ready for KubeCon. So I've been playing around with the Workload API, and something I posted on the Slack thread last week. I mean, I guess we have the status one is solved or will be solved, hopefully. But the other one I'm still a little confused on is like if you have a bring your own workload kind of perspective, is there any point in having the workload API set? Because like we have the same information in pod group and the workload API, and I don't necessarily understand why someone in a pod group would reference the workload and then also have to specify the same min count in both.
So basically, we're saying whether we want to support standalone pod group for this use case where I don't want
Well, it
controllers.
already works.
It
like
works, but like so we are discussing this during the API review actually, and what we are doing, and Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong. Right now we are implementing validation, so the workload reference will be always set, right? But we are designing it in a way that we can relax this in the future. If we have like a concrete use case, or maybe you already have concrete use case, but I would like not to make like too many changes now.
So that
maybe we should.
sorry for interrupting.
No worries. Go ahead.
That changed last week while we were out of office. So basically, we will be supporting standalone pod groups, meaning pod groups without template reference from the get-go. Still, like I think we need validation, like admission controller that checks whether or not the referenced workload object exists. So that's the first thing that we should do in that admission controller. And the second, probably ensure that the values that are set in the pod group that references the workload match the values that we have set in the matching workload object in the pod group template, basically. And I think Kevin's question, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I understood you correctly, the question is, why do we need workload in the first place? Is that right, or am I missing something here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my main concern now would be that we have to specify the min count in both the pod group and the workload, whether or not we reference the workload or not. And then if we're supporting something like elasticity, then does that mean we have to update both the static workload policy and the pod group policy?
I'm a little bit confused now. Why do we need to update the pod group if we already set the template in the workload? I think if we set the pod group template in the workload, everything will be reflected already in the pod group. The pod group as a standalone, it's different use case. So we might need to have just a pod group without the workload, right? But if we have the pod group template, that should be it. We should just set everything in one place.
Well, that's not what the API says, though. The API says that the scheduling policy for the pod group is required. And so we do have to put the min count in the pod group.
Okay.
And then even if we reference it to the workload, we still have to specify it in the workload also.
Yes, it is mandatory in the workload API, in the pod group template in the workload API, right? So you need to specify it in the workload API as part of the pod group template specifications. So
and in the pod group definition.
So basically, like the idea was like what we were describing in caps for 136 is that from scheduler perspective, only pod group matters.
Yeah.
Right. That was the idea. So given that scheduler doesn't, like, I'm not sure if it was already submitted. Dominic, you probably will know, probably not, right? But we have a PR for this, or like that's Antex PR actually, right? So once this PR with the API changes, once this PR goes in, we stop looking at the workload from the scheduler.
Yes. Yeah. I know that, but the pod group is being created by the template, right?
But like the question is like, who is creating that? I understand like Kevin's concern about I'm a user. I don't want to use any controller integration. I just want to create pod. Like I want to use some kind of gang scheduling, whatever, right? I do it on my own. And it's quite cumbersome if I need to create both workload and pod group.
If I created a workload, that should be enough. I don't have to create.
But then
right?
who creates the pod group, which is needed by scheduler?
The controller. Oh, so you're saying if the controller is not supporting.
Yeah, if I don't want to use control integration, I just want to, I want to create pod group and attach it to my pods somehow, right? I want to play with this API, whatever. That's the.
Yeah, like I'm more just wondering, I'm trying to get some slides together for working group batch highlighting the API. And what I noticed as I was testing the latest changes is that all I really need is the pod group, and I can reference the pod group in a job template, and then that will be gang scheduled, and that works. Yeah. But then I'm a little unclear on, like, there's like a lot of duplication with the workload API now, and maybe for bring your own workload, it's really bring your own pod group, and we don't actually need the workload in that case. But yeah, from a controller perspective, I think it's fine that we create the workload, and then the pod group references the workload that we created, but that's still, the scheduling policy is still a required field for both. So there's like a disconnect where the pod group template, I guess that's what we're saying, is eventually the admission controller needs to make sure that the workload pod group and the workload pod group template and the pod group scheduling policies all match and are not diverging.
Yep.
But in the bring your own case, we're not going to have a workload. We're just going to have the pod group, we're saying, right? Like that's what I thought we said in the latest PR, which makes sense, right? It's like the workload is the static config that's used to punch out new pod groups by controllers. But if you're not using a controller, you don't really need it.
I would say yes, but that's a new development here, right? Because as of last week, we were not even considering bringing the standalone pod group E136. Probably it makes sense, but I also say we should think it through, right? And I definitely see a reason for workload, right, for controllers. Even though you may say it's redundant, right? We already have this information in pod group, then why should we creating workload? But the idea is if you consider more complex cases, when there is I don't know, let's say 3 levels of controllers, something that is managing replicated, let's say, maybe stupid idea, but replicated job sets, right? And job set manages replicated jobs, right? Then you need this one object, for example, for the job set controller is second in this hierarchy, to know which pod subgroups to create, right? And somehow to pass the intent, and maybe even for the controller down below, right? So you need this central object with policy, with this static template of policy, right?
Yeah, or we have a couple of other, different templates for the pod groups. So we need one place to have all the templates related to this workload.
Also, that's. But maybe it also makes sense for more complex cases in general, probably for different reasons, right? To have one place with all the, where I can basically examine the structure of the workload, whatever. But yeah.
And we might need it in the future for the auto scaling, for example, or for different other objects that they need to reference the workload to to know everything related to that, to all the pod groups in this place, or maybe adding another sub spec for the workload. I can see a lot of use cases actually in the future, maybe not now, or maybe if with the bring your own your pod group or gang scheduling, but definitely I can see a lot of use cases in the future.
Yeah, and I think this makes sense. I mean, we're saying from the controller side, we want the workload, and then the controller can read the workload object and then create the pod groups from that, which will match everything, and that's fine. I guess the only thing, once we figure out our immutability story, we'll have to kind of figure out how that changes work, and I'm fine. That doesn't have to be in this. We don't have to flesh that out right now. So for the slides, I'm only highlighting just the API, so this is fine as is, and obviously it's 1.36 will be a little rough user experience, or it's at least working based off of the PR. So testing that out, it was cool to see. So that at least clarifies my main question. So.
The problem is how to document everything, like like we're just discussed now, and make the user like be able to use this feature as like as straightforward as possible. We might need to think if the user decided to bring your own pod group, we might create the workload like behind the scene, but that like it's just like a workaround. But we need
Yeah, but
to
then like who does that, right? Like if you
we need a controller. Yes, this is what
exactly need a
I'm thinking
controller.
about. So we might need a controller for the workload. Do we need it or not? Like lots of this. But we need to think about how to make user life easier than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
But
the
I guess
controller integration. But yeah, I think I think it's for bring your own. I don't expect the user experience to be great. Like if, at least for Q, I'm imagining like if someone tries to orchestrate pod groups and they create like, let's say an MPI job that doesn't have this controller, if I suspend or resume, if I change any of the specs, things are not going to work out that well. And that's why, like, I think having the controllers be aware of pod groups is definitely what we want. There will be cases where we have older APIs. Like we already saw a request from Kevin Klus around supporting the MPI job for the 1.35 gang scheduling, and the MPI job is kind of almost effectively unmaintained at this point. So like people like they can add support for this if they update their APIs to use 1.35 Kubernetes, but it can just be that's manual, and that's a path for some of those people. Doesn't mean one that we have to. Guess we shouldn't break it, but it sounds like if pod group is what the scheduler needs to know about, we would probably not break this one anyway.
Yeah, I guess it's fine because we are still only in alpha, right? In 136, and I expect us like once we go to beta in 137, we at least need to document better what it really means to use standalone pod group. What are the limitations, right? Because something may like not work or not be supported in that case. Like we need to analyze it more thoroughly.
And
But like we have time for that. Like we are not in beta, so yeah.
Yeah, and I believe if we decided that the pod group can be supported as bring your own pod group without the workload API, I believe we need to really consider having a controller, a dedicated controller for the pod group. And that will change all the integration because at this point, the true workload, like a controller will just create the template or whatever pod group, and this controller will create the pod group. Will be able, like would be responsible for the life cycle for the pod group. But I think, yeah, I think we might need to consider this as well, or think about it. Let's say that.
Yeah, sure. Like obviously we should discuss this. Ideally, like we would also drive everything by user stories, right? So if we have like a proper need for using your standalone own pod group, then like we should consider how to make it work properly. But yeah, so far like we are more experimenting with the API, right? That's alpha, so I guess we are good. But yeah, definitely for beta we should at least figure out like what we want, because we can also like just drop this support, right? Like if we don't see like concrete use case other than playing around. So but yeah.
Can I ask a favor from you and Anthony? Can we summarize the API changes that we have so far? So like and you can share it in the Slack channel or anything, because I really I'm confused now. Like I'm trying to follow all the PR for the API. Like all the comments and stuff like that, but there are a lot of changes. So we might need to just summarize this in one place so I can reflect it in my PRs and just, like for everyone to understand, actually. Is that possible?
I guess so. Like some TLDR of the
Yeah, it's just, TLDR.
at least today's version of the API.
Version one of the of the changes. Yeah.
Where do you think it would be suitable to put it? sig-scheduling?
I think the workload API, the workload
scheduling.
Yeah, Slack. Yeah, Slack channel.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
I think that Gemini should be good in it. We can ask it to summarize it.
Yep. Yeah, nevertheless, like I'll take care of it, but probably early tomorrow since it's pretty late.
Yeah, and adding task for this to update the KIP as well. Yeah. Okay. Any other point for discussion? If yeah, if not, we can end this meeting early, and hopefully, yeah.
So, like, actually have a question about your proposal. I'm just like catching up after the being out of office last week about your proposal for the controller API. So, are you?
Oh yeah.
I see, like Wojtek and Kevin were actually against, but I like totally agree that we should document that. So, I will add you like the edit rights to the document and should probably add a new tab there. Are you okay with that, or do you want to discuss it like?
Yeah, let's add it there, and I will add all the pros and cons, and like why.
Okay. Okay, so I will give you like edit rights, and please add like a tab with alternatives, and we can like you can add like describe it there, and yeah. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah.